All right, so for this next, hello, good afternoon. It's good you guys are having fun. That's good. You didn't all, you're sitting there quiet, I would be worried. We're a little bit behind schedule, but we've never really worried too much about that, especially on this day. What this next section is about is called speed geeking or lightning talks. And the idea was we just got a lot of context for the search and rescue problems. This is supposed to be actually just cool stuff that what we're interested. There'll be some deeper meanings in there, but it's just an opportunity to try to keep it to 7 minutes to just give you some rapid fire information. Some stuff you may say, I'm going to take this home and do it. Some of you might just be like, I have no idea what I'd even do with that, but it was cool. So we know it's getting towards the end of the day, so we want to keep it flowing, and we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. But we're going to try to rapidly switch between speakers. So I'll kick us off. Vanessa is the time master, and she's going to be mean about it, and I'm going to support her in her meanness.
Well, you did delegate her the duties to do it, and she's the villain.
Yeah, yes. So without further ado, I think David was going to speak about crowdsourcing and rescue, but I think now you're going to show something completely different, but also equally cool.
Yeah, to some aspect. So crowdsourcing and futuristic ideas is sort of what I'm going to talk about. So I got started all the way back in 2009 through the Esri 4-H grant program, and that was when I was in high school. And then also emergency management, and I sort of got involved in that in 2012 when I was working with our assessor's office doing an internship. Now I'm undergrad in GIS emergency management. I'm an intern at the Iowa DOT transportation, and then also work at NAPSIG as GIS technicians. Also, if you do have internship opportunities, let me know. I'm looking. If you need people. So this is for the summer 2018. So this is crowdsourced Maria, sort of. So I worked a little bit with this. Me and Paul and some of the other NAPSIG people sort of volunteered to help with geospatial best practices. And so that's that application. So they basically mapped out points of rescues and road blockages and stuff. So this is their data entry form on the public front end side of they worked with the Survey 123 team to design this. That feeds into their back end. And so this is one of my things that I designed, the Puerto Rico bridge map. Working with bridge data here in Iowa. Let's see if I can zoom in. Oh, there we go. So the purpose, this was basically, I created this for DTOP, which is a Puerto Rican transportation agency to prioritize bridges to be inspected so they can be technically, quote unquote, reopened. And then the secondary purpose was to provide bridge obstruction information along with restrictions such as width, height, and potentially even weight restrictions to relief agencies and the public. So the analysis, I pulled the USAR data, which is really, really nice for the track, so I could see what was traversed. Also the waypoints so when they put waypoints down of flooded bridges and that sort of stuff. I utilized crowdsource HQ points, and then I also utilized imagery. So the imagery was good for, let's see if I can zoom in really quick to one of the south bridges. I zoom in close enough so you can see that this bridge is clearly underwater and destroyed. There's other worse ones like that too. So you can also see the ticker. So some other real-time ideas that I got. So these are sort of ones that my group at the Iowa DOT we put out. And it's just sort of, unfortunately it's late, it's 4:19, so everyone's off of work. So there's no snowplows out. There were like an hour ago. But you can see up in Minnesota they're plowing away. They're getting some snow up there. So being able to do stuff like this, of being able to track your assets in real time. And this is out to the public, so you can hit this up today at trackapply.iowodot.gov. And also worth noting is one of the big pushes that I personally was working on. I got this started this January, is to pull road conditions for North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and of course we have Iowa. But just to be able to pull road conditions for the region and to display them, because no one just travels within Iowa. And I mean, and I'm serious about that. If you look at all the other states, no one just travels in Illinois or Nebraska. They travel interstate. So that data of being able to make data open and accessible, that's one of my things that I like to push. And then this one is a really cool idea too. We just launched this this January actually, and it's got a State Scoop Award. Let's go up here.
That's a skunk, right?
Yeah, this is our apparently our skunk work logo thing. I didn't realize that we had one. So this we get from our AVL solution, we get every 10 seconds a truck pings on the segment. Every 15 seconds we get a material ping. And so what we're able to do with that data is now we're able to aggregate it to the segment level. So if I zoom in close enough, you can. So this idea is sort of a potential to take, where you can take now your USAR points and your other points, aggregate them to a line segment, and when you click on it, you can see, oh, when was the first time that your teams hit this segment and touched it, potentially what teams have gone on the segment or searched this area, along with the last time that this area was searched or passed or whatever. And we also do some monetization, so if you're a taxpayer, you can see how much money we're spending. Some USAR integration stuff from last Friday. We had the IRMA AAR down in Orlando that I just came from. Some ideas from that I sort of had was to be able to integrate a definite need to be able to pull USAR data, or to be able to pull like Highfeld data and do an update on that instead of having USAR teams, as pointed out earlier, to collect that data. Let's see here. More integration, better data integration with here, Waze, Google, so you guys can do better routing. USAR teams said that they would do crowdsourcing. And then this is the final finale. It's really cool. So this data point I put in, so you know how those bugger ICS or the 214s, so you can use collector or survey 123, and you can do this and click, and then you can have it auto-populated. So now you have your survey 123 or your files database or whatever populate a feature service. From the feature service, push it out to a form, and then be able to, put it in here. So now all your data you can export your data. So this is one of the cool things that hopefully we'll get in MapSAR pretty soon. So I think that's my time. Cool, I did it. Awesome stuff.
All right, while we transition, you can ask one question of David. Don's gonna head up next. We gave him a boring title, but by no means will this be boring. We talked a little about probability of area this morning. How many people remember what probability of area is? It's about looking in the right spot. Don will probably talk a little bit more about that. Or he can talk about whatever he wants.
Well, I don't know about that. Try and keep it relevant.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up.
No.
Here's the clicker, and I will give you a 1 minute warning. So next up is Don Ferguson, and he is on the NAPSIG SAR GIS working group. Are you the co-chair?
I think so, yeah.
Is your title co-chair?
Yeah, for now.
Depends on how the presentation goes.
I'm out of here then. No.
But a lot of you might know Don because he wrote IGT for SAR and has been a really integral part of our team for a long time.
All right, well, I'll jump right into this. I kind of saw a show of hands there when Paul asked about POA, and this is kind of what this talk is about. It's about probability. All right, click it. So, you know, the idea here is what happens when we don't find them with the reflex test. And if you talk to the people that have been doing SAR and kind of look at SAR statistics over time, you'll see that, you know, the overwhelming majority of SARs are ended within, you know, that first operational period. So you don't often get into this stuff where you need to think about POA. So, you know, in terms of being able to continue to be proficient about it, you know, because you're not using it that often, you know, we tend to not be very proficient about it. And one of the reasons why we don't use it that often is not only do we don't have an opportunity to use it, but it can be challenging, especially when you're doing it manually. So let me talk about the need for it here just a minute. Search, of course, emergency. You know, we've all seen this, and Brian talked about this earlier with the MRA stuff a little bit. There's one thing that I do want to highlight in terms of how we think about, or the need for utilizing stuff like probability, is search is a very abstract concept with regards to emergency response. You know, if you're responding to a fire, you can usually see the fire, right? If you're responding to a car accident, you can see the car accident. You can see the bridge that's underwater, or something like that. Here, we're dealing with a situation where you're looking for somebody that you don't know where they're at. You don't know what state they're in. You don't know where they, you know, how they got there, or anything like that. So there's lots of unknowns, lots of uncertainty, and so forth. And as I think Paul alluded to this earlier, we get very little feedback over the course of an incident. You know, we have, you know, 1,000 acres, a couple thousand acres that you might be searching, but you're getting, you know, one team every 6 hours reporting back to you about what they've done. So, so the feedback can be pretty bleak. So all that makes it, you know, fairly challenging. So, you know, we need, when we get into this incidents where you don't find that first operational period, you know, we need a more systematic approach to be able to prioritize our areas and monitor the performance of the teams that are going out into the field. You know, it needs to be data driven. It needs to be, you know, utilizing information that the search teams are coming back and giving to you, as well as the analysis that you're doing in base to really drive the process, dealing with that uncertainty and so forth. So I want to just kind of get in here a little bit more to the meat of it. We saw similar slides of these earlier in the MRA talk about lost person behavior analysis, and now, you know, we can do all that in GIS, right? These are all scripted, automatic run, and they'll do all the lost person behavior analysis for us now with just a little bit of input. So, you know, certainly the rings, the multi-rings is pretty familiar, but, you know, even find features now, we can take land cover data, overlay that with different other feature data to be able to automate these analyses on lost person behavior things. So that's a tool that GIS really, you know, it doesn't bring, it's not a new tool that GIS brings, because the lost person behavior stuff was there before that, but now we can make use of it a little bit better, because we can actually do things like define features across a wide area and do that very quickly. And then, you know, using, eventually utilizing that, and then, you know, so the lost person behavior, and then also terrain analysis, and both these things are going to end up resulting in developing probability areas, as we talked about earlier. So, you know, with terrain analysis, we saw the cell phone stuff earlier that we can do, but also things like plotting ginseng habitat, right? I mean, on the East Coast, you know, we do a lot of searches for ginseng hunters. Well, where would a ginseng hunter go? Right? They would go somewhere where ginseng grows. So, you know, now we can even do things like analyzing the habitat, or the best environments for ginseng to grow, and other things of that sort. So we can provide that kind of analysis, which will ultimately lead to developing probability regions. So within search theory, we talk about probability regions and search segments. They're two different things, but they're intimately linked together. So I'm going to talk mostly about probability regions, and then we'll see how that kind of filters into search segments. But we define these probability regions based off of where we think the subject is. And we use all that analysis we did, loss person behavior, terrain analysis, gut feeling, all that stuff weighs into developing these probability regions. And then we get, the brain trust together, and they do their Matsons and so on and so forth to assign a probability or a probability area for different regions within the search area. And then, ultimately, we sort of throw out this equation of probability of success, POS, is related to the probability area and how well we can search that through the probability detection. So I know I'm kind of going through this quickly for those of you that aren't familiar with search theory, but the next couple of slides I have kind of address it a little bit more. But ultimately, this is what we're trying to do. And what this does is this assigns, based off of, based off of the POAs, based off of all that analysis. The POD is the teams that are going out into the field, and then we're using that information that the teams going out into the field to help drive the probability of success. Where this becomes complicated a little bit is when you have multiple searches going out, which you do, of course. You have multiple searches going out into the field. So as this evolves over time, is where it kind of breaks down when it becomes manual. But when the computer can do it, it's a lot easier. So let me jump ahead. So this is the equation that we're dealing with, right? You wouldn't want to do this all manually for your search area. It becomes really complicated to do this. So we have scripts that can handle all the math and everything for you now. So let me just quickly go through an example here. You kind of see how this evolves and why it's a little bit challenging. So this is our search area. Let's say you want to search this and you want to search it with 50% POD. So we see that region, or that segment, we'll call these search segments, that segment drops by 50%, but the other ones go up, right? If you search one region and they're not there, then it's most likely they're in the other region, or they're in the rest of the world. And the way that we've set, the way this is set up to run is that it runs, on those regions as well as the rest of the world. So, all right, so that's basically it. And then I'll also just kind of throw in the last here, a little bit about GPS tracks. We can use those tracks to calculate a theoretical POD, and I'll talk to you later about that, I guess. But that's more that we can do with this. So just to quickly summarize, and you can read the slides, but basically, we use these probability regions and search segments that have probability area to help deal with the uncertainty that's out there, and now that we have computer tools to do all the math for us, it becomes pretty easy. So that's all I got.
Very good.
So Don just gave you like 3 days worth of info in 7 minutes. He's the only one that would be able to do that.
We'll do a little bit of that again on Wednesday at a slower pace.
No, actually, I'm going to do that fast.
He's going to do it at that speed, but just more and more.
So I'll hold up a sign at the 1 minute warning.
Okay, great.
So next up is John Holub, and he's the risk analyst for FEMA for Region 8, which is out of Denver, Lakewood, Colorado.
That center. Yeah.
So.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me. Try to make up some time. So my background is wildland fire forestry, and now I work for FEMA, and we're very much 50,000 foot level. We don't do a lot of tactical field work at all. If we do, most of it's logistical in nature. So I was trying to think of something that I could give you guys that might help you in field search and rescue operations. So one thing that I deal with all the time is county parcel data. And back when I used to work on fire IMTs, as soon as we got assigned to an area, I'd try to meet the local GIS person. I'd say, hey, do you have structure data? And sometimes they did. A lot of the times out in the middle of western Montana, it was digitized off a quad from 1968, updated in 1975, digitized in the 90s, and it had, maybe 40% in some of these high growing areas. But anyway, some of the pros of it are it's free, publicly available, oftenly, usually up to date, maintained by the state and county because it's tied to property taxes. Often has a dollar value attribution, which you guys deal with life-saving, life-sustaining. And by the time it gets to FEMA level, usually we're thinking about money, basically. Some of the cons are parcel centroids don't really equal point on structure. Here in Logmont, where The average parcel size is about 0.18 acres. They're very close, but if you get out into a more rural environment where the average parcel's 4 acres, 10, 200, they don't really meet. And at that point, you might want to start trying to geocode or reverse geocode. Another kind of requires time to format. You got to get out there, talk to your state, county, see if you can get this beforehand to format it to meet your needs. Not uniformly available or standard uniform attribution or anything. Some common attributes are addresses, usually property and mailing. That comes in handy because if they don't match, you can do a quick analysis on how many of these homes might be secondary or vacation homes, might be vacant at the time of the incident. Property type, single family residence, government building, school, rural sheds, that kind of thing. Improvement, dollar value, again, building. Square footage, number of bedrooms, we've used that in the past to kind of derive populations based on census averages for the tract. Less common attributes are building attributes, such as foundation type, which we use in flood analysis all the time. Roof, which you could get an idea of potentially the fire danger if it's like a shake shingle roof. Phone numbers we've used in the past on fire IMTs, trying to notify, set up your auto dialer. Okay, here's some analyses or intersections that we've done using parcels. Sum of households by 1 kilometer USNG, so we could quickly potentially provide that information to the state so they can prioritize which areas they want to hit first. Potentially isolated communities, or where is it going to take very long to get through. Say if there's a rock slide or a landslide and you have to drive all the way around the state to get somewhere. Arrival times, we do fire site burn period simulation sometimes. We do flood modeling, crest times. We know when the incident will reach certain structures. Intensities, burned area, BART calculations, we've done those for, actually, we did those up for this huge fire in Montana, and it didn't impact a lot of structures, but it devastated the local community because so many millions of dollars of ranch land, which was their primary economic driver. You could do it with all kinds of predetermined hazard potentials, wildfire potentials. 3 minutes, looking good. Okay, census. We can again get average population size. I think in our region, which is Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, North, South Dakota, Utah, it goes anywhere from 1.6 to I think up to 4.1 in some tracts. Social vulnerability is going to be huge for search and rescue. How many people have ambulatory needs in the census tract? How many are over 65, under 5? I think in the Boulder flooding in 2013, there was a community that had very low English language skills. I think they were Vietnamese. Some counties or some parcels or tracts don't have sufficient vehicles to help evacuate people. This is probably the closest we get to response at the regional level, the Fire Management Assistance Grants, which we had a lot of these this year. And you can see here is the timeline. Within a few hours, we have to determine whether FEMA is going to subsidize this. And basically, the idea is to prevent the wildfire from becoming a major disaster. So the first piece would be the FMAG, the Fire Management Assistance Grant. Then if it's a major fire, it'll go to emergency deck, and after that, it'll go to major disaster declaration. This was, whenever we get like notification of fire going off near an urban area, we'll do a quick analysis like this. This is just on the south end of Helena, and this is all off state of Montana. They have a statewide structure database, which they put up on the web, which is fantastic. It really makes it easy to do this. Luckily, they caught this one before it burned any structures, so it wouldn't go to FMAG, but that's how we might use it. And this is a really ugly map, but I pulled in the Montana structures. This is the Lolo Peak fire. It did get an FMAG declaration, and then you can see these red pixels are high wildfire potential, orange. So you can see there's a lot of structures near the burn perimeter with high wildfire potential, so that's an FMAG to prevent that disaster. This was the Waldo Canyon fire in, I can't remember what year, 2013, 12? But anyway, we got aerial imagery and we did hand by hand with parcel data, and that we could, this is what our leadership wanted to see, dollar values broken out by grid. The total market value of these properties destroyed in this one fire event was almost $90 million. And it can also be used for long-term. This is long-term studies, mitigation projects. Here we have building footprints, which is a polygon, a little different than points or parcels. Basically, we use HAZUS modeling estimation software to try to determine some problem areas are and maybe build some levees, do something like that. This is our major concern in FEMA Region 8. It's the Wasatch Fault in Salt Lake City, Utah. So the modeled potential fatalities from a 7.0 earthquake are about 625, requiring hospitalization 2,000, loss of 40 billion. And this analysis is driven totally from the USGS shake map and parcel data. More of the same. One thing we did do out of this is we could kind of determine where to pre-position our FEMA staging areas so that they would be less impacted by structures going down or bridges. Another one for tornado, same thing. Here's Minot floods of 2011. We just intersect the parcels with flood depth and come up with dollar values, and that's about it. So in conclusion, it can be useful for response and SAR applications. Check with your state and county for availability. Thank you.
Any questions for John while we transition? Does everybody know what a parcel is? Yes. It's okay if you don't. Most taxpayers don't.
Mine go with small.
So I'm up next, so let me set the timer for myself.
Oh.
Okay, it already started. So last year I presented a little bit on, from a GIS specialist perspective, talking about like what you need to do to get ready for search and rescue. I'm going to build upon that. This information was in last year's presentation, and it was mentioned previously, especially during the panel discussion, but you have to prepare. You cannot show up at a SAR incident and not either be able to speak the language for incident command system or not understand what GIS products you can request. So you really need to prepare and train ahead of time. These are some pointers. I won't read through them for GIS professionals. But the other thing I wanted to expand on this year is more preparing and training your rangers in the Park Service case, or your team members, and dispatch. Okay, so a lot of times I feel like dispatch gets overlooked, and they're a really key integral part for that initial location information and for getting capturing and documenting pieces of the search. So one of the things that we've struggled with, I came to Glen Canyon in December. Before that I was at Yosemite, and I worked half for the protection division, and we struggled a lot with what are rangers comfortable with, what technology should we use. And so I was like, oh, I can build a little custom app, and I tried to use the App Studio, and I couldn't get it to do what I wanted to do. But I based it on understanding the learning curve for my folks, and also how quickly can I get new users set up. And hardware considerations, network connectivity considerations. So you have to kind of do an assessment, like what are your user requirements? Like you have to start there before you can start picking the different technology that we've been talking about. So a lot of folks use the Avenza PDF. We have a lot of county teams that come in and work with our Yosemite folks. A lot of them come in and they expect a QR code and they expect a geo-enabled PDF. And so we have to have that ready for them. But our protection rangers and our structural fire and wildland fire folks at Yosemite are now using CarryMap. And we use that basically when I hit walls with App Studio. I found CarryMap, and it's with an Esri partner. It's Data East. They make X-Tools if you're a GIS professional. They make the X-Tools product. The license was pretty affordable on the GIS side, and then it was free for everybody else to download. We use that to replace our paper map books that are in the patrol vehicles and our ambulances and things. So they're already comfortable using it. It's not good for collecting information in the field. However, it's great for them to be able to do a search. So I'm intrigued by what Doug showed earlier for the Explorer for ArcGIS. I want to explore that a little more. But the other important thing is, what's your backup? You can't just rely on the technology. And also having a centralized place. So the rangers know this is where they go for information. We have a video if they prefer that. We have step-by-step instructions for how to use Carry Map on Android separately from iPhone. Okay, so all different considerations. And one of the things that I found is really useful is to go back to basics. Make sure the rangers or your team members, I think this is really common with search and rescue teams, but with rangers, you know, do they still know how to use a paper map? If they need to use it, that's still got to be included in the training. How do we use the old Garmin GPS devices? Because there's a lot of park units, that's what we have. And also making sure that folks have the different pieces for that. So again, I mentioned the Venza PDF. For Park Service folks, we do have an enterprise license agreement for Venza. But I think we're trying to move it forward to Collector, but we also have a lot of connectivity issues. And then within Park Service, we have something called Park Atlases for different park units. And that's basically something that runs on top of GeoCortex, another partner of Esri's. So there's a lot of information that can be brought in through the different feature services. So this is just an example of what we have for our rangers. It's a one-pager. They can print it out, they can take it with them. They do need to access it from Google Drive, but step-by-step directions, making sure those are updated for folks. So again, practicing, having cheat sheets. We, at the Park Service, I stress that we need to understand, my rangers need to understand U.S. National Grid, but we don't use it. We need to be able to talk to our aviation resources. So we need to talk about how to communicate coordinates over the radio. So there are some basic things. Some of these are obvious, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Stressing to teams, do you have your batteries, cords, things like that when you show up on an incident? And the more you practice and do various exercises, the more you'll work these things out. And then if you're on the SAR practitioner side, make sure you're touching base with the GIS and IT folks in between incidents. Ask them for help. We get excited that we get to work on incidents. You know, it's something different. We work in these little GIS worlds where we have to be so detail oriented. Where on a SAR, it's like, you need to get a map up on the wall for briefing, and if you need to use a Sharpie to fix stuff, that's the way it is. And then if we can improve the communication a little bit and understand what different products you can request. How am I doing?
You got another minute.
Oh, wow, okay. I shouldn't have cut out that slide. I put 7 minutes. I cut out the slide. But basically, I think it's really important that we communicate from both sides of, you know, folks with experience for GIS and search and rescue, and get those lines of communication open. And in the Park Service particularly, you're pulling GIS folks who are maybe coming from a resource management background. They don't really understand what's involved with an incident. So if you prep them earlier on, you're more likely to get some longevity out of them. Look to the wildland fire community because they're further ahead of us with some of this technology and organization. So it's a really good resource. So there you go.
Very good.
So next is the video.
So this is going to be, I haven't watched this yet. Hopefully we can trust our friends from Canada. But this is Peter.
Hi, good afternoon.
This is Peter Devanney, who's been a long-time user of what we call MapSAR, which is an ArcGIS tool built on ArcGIS Desktop, which you'll get an introduction to over the next few days. Peter's been a long-time tester. I'm not actually sure what his background is, but it seems like he just does search and rescue and GIS all the time. And I really appreciate his help. He's helped us out remotely on a lot of incidents, and he wishes he could be here with us, but here he is across the internet using YouTube. So we'll give it a shot.
Peter Devanney from Sauvetage Bénévole Outaouais, also known as Ottawa Volunteer Search and Rescue. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our experiences with MapSAR, with a group of people that are non-GIS professionals, just search managers that were looking for better tools. And here's some of the things that we learned and experienced. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, and thanks, Paul, for the opportunity to present. A little bit about the team first. We were established in 1996. It's a charitable organization. We're about 150 strong. Like many teams, we have a 3-part mandate. Ground search and rescue is the core of what we do. We also do support for emergency services, and we have a strong huggatory public education type program for public education. We're of course 24/7, 365, and fully autonomous and bilingual. We have a number of specialty teams in addition to regular GSAR. We've got a strong canine team, mountain bike team. We have a number of people that are trained in air operations for doing search and navigation from the air. We have a tracking team. We've got a strong first aid capability, and we have a remote rescue component that's also in development at the moment. We'll see why in a moment here. We also have a strong incident management capability, both in terms of search management, which we'll talk about more, and also situation management. We've done, this year has been a very big year for the team in terms of flood response, and we've done a number of calls for welfare checks, and even boil water advisories, getting out to residents that where it's an emergency, they need to know they need to do things like that. So we work both in the SAR world and in the emergency response world. This slide shows our area of responsibility from a response point of view. It's approximately 40,000 square miles. We do everything from search management to remote rescue to just providing additional GSAR assets for the police agencies of jurisdiction. The team is fairly busy. This year we're showing about 50 incident days already this year. That represents about 22 individual incidents. So quite a lot that the team has on the go at any given time. How do we get into MapSAR? Well, for us, search management, of course, is information management. And it's information that's largely spatial in nature. Last seen here was going there, has a favorite spot over there. So how to best organize and document and keep track of what's been done and what needs to be done. How to keep the big picture, how to keep situational awareness. But the other question that comes up is what's out there when you're trying to plan a search? Where are the travel ways, the blue lines, the hazards, the attraction points, the terrain, and how to best curate that data in various networks. For us, GIS was the answer. MapSAR was GIS based, so it came with those attributes. It came along a time when we were looking for a better solution to printing maps. It was really that's straightforward. We liked the speed at which we could create multiple assignments. We liked the ability to segment areas and then flip those to assignments as we moved into later operational periods. It gave us better documentation, and it gave us much better situational awareness. Of course, it wasn't without its challenges. It was computer-based for one, so for some, anything more than opening a Microsoft Word document is a challenge. We had to deal with that. And it was also a whole new world for us. It was a GIS system. There was no GIS professionals on the team. ArcMap is complicated. There's no getting around that, at least for us. But the templates helped, and big thanks to John Petter, who helped a lot and helped us with the understanding of this. The other challenges included operations integration. Field feedback was not easy to incorporate through ops. Everything really had to be done by the person that was using MapSAR in plans. We didn't have the benefit of enterprise server for a volunteer team. It was an expense we couldn't afford. So things like clues, GPS tracks, input, team and team members assigned to a task couldn't really flow back into MapSAR database. And of course, I mentioned the costs as well were a bit of an issue. From a wish list point of view, simplification where possible while still retaining the automation benefits. There's a lot of magic in MapSAR, and it's given us a whole new capability that we never would have had before. And we use it in our day-to-day operations, but probably that's the request for simplification and reduce dependencies just to get up and get an operation going are probably the two that I hear the most. I wish it wasn't so complicated. not how we deal with that, given we've got a complicated system underneath. But that's some of the feedback from those using it that are non-GIS professionals. If we could get the planning and operation tools to talk to each other, that would be amazing. We use SARtrack for ops and for team tracking. Most important for the log, it's got an amazing logging system. It would be nice if there were ways to tie those together. And of course, field data collection as well would be nice. When we assign teams, we try to do an assignment based on a desired POD for an area, and we're going to do that using a critical separation versus effective sweep width calculation. So we try to give them an idea of what POD we want, what level of efficiency do we need in the early days versus the early hours versus the later hours or days of the search. So it would be nice if there were tools as well that could actually kind of check that work and use some of the GPS tracks to do POD verifications or calculations. POA work as well being built in would be a nice layer of automation. I suspect I'm running out of time here, so just like to say thanks to everybody and appreciate the opportunity to present, and happy to answer any questions by email or Slack. There, Paul knows how to find me. Thanks again.
We can still clap. He might be listening live to himself, which would be ironic, but Peter just went through the tutorials. Like I said, he's a great tester. So the tutorials that you'll use tomorrow, he's gone through, and he already threw it for a loop and said, I'm going to use MapSAR online for a flood, not a missing person search. And through about 5 minutes of chatting, he was able to just change the mission for his app. And so I see Peter as a real innovator and not kind of staying in the lines, but kind of stepping out from time to time. So I really appreciate Peter's participation.
Thanks. So one of the things you said on his wish list is that all the POA and the time travel tools were part of it. Well, they are. They're part of the extended MapSAR. That's not what he was talking about. But so I didn't want you guys to be confused with what I talked about earlier, because all that POA stuff is integrated into the tool. It's already there. The travel time tool or cost model, which is the travel time tool, is all there as well. He wasn't familiar with it.
All right, so Doug's gonna talk about taking WebGIS with you.
So thanks for giving me a chance to talk. I'm going to go a little bit higher level than some of the other folks, but hopefully this gives you a sense of what you can do when you need to go out in the field. And when we say WebGIS, it's sort of an oxymoron to think that that's going to go on a device and go into the field where you have no connection. But we've really been building all of our apps to support that workflow because you and lots of other folks that we work with are really in those harsh environments when it comes to connectivity on a regular basis. So we term these apps for the field. And really, these apps are meant to do a handful of things, but really, it's to make you more efficient. And there are a number of different apps, some of which we've already talked about today. But really, they're meant to make it simpler. We're supposed to, the idea is that these apps are supposed to be usable and easily deployed to people who aren't familiar with GIS. Our job with apps is to extend the reach of GIS and in doing so, really help people make better decisions because they're going to get data a lot quicker. And as many folks have talked about today already, talking about modernizing our workflows. Many of our paper-based workflows were inefficient, they're hard to use, and we can ask limited questions of that. So really, it's about how do we get beyond that to really start fine-tuning our analysis and ultimately being a lot more successful in our work. So we have a suite of apps, and we expect that some people, we built them to work well together. So in our mind, it's the sum is greater than total is better than the sum of the parts. I mean, what is that? You know what I mean. But anyway, so but each one of these can be used together. So when I go through these, I'm going to kind of rip through them. Some of them may pique your interest, some of them may not be useful to you, but realize that we built these to work together, but you can take any piece of these and work with them and be successful. All right, so in terms of the field operations, we've talked a lot about this already, just not necessarily with these terms. So planning. So any operation starts with planning, and typically that's done with ArcGIS for desktop. That could be Pro, that could be ArcMap, it could be MapSAR, lots of different solutions to do that. But once we get beyond that, we need to actually get people out into the field, and that's where our first mobile application comes in, Workforce for ArcGIS. So Workforce for ArcGIS allows people in the office to assign and distribute and manage work that goes out in the field. It's really powerful. We'll be looking at that a little bit later this week. Navigator. So many of you have access to private roads, trails that you may have access to get you from point A to point B. Navigator allows you to include that information without requiring work completely offline. All right, so captures. We've talked a lot about field data collection today. We've talked about UAS. We've talked about Survey 123 and Collector. All of these apps are designed to work, of course, offline and in the field. And then how do we pull all of this together? Well, we need to make better decisions, and that's really where Operations Dashboard for ArcGIS can come in. It allows you to get that unified picture, to start understanding that data in a way that's a little bit more accessible, and do so quickly and in near real time as that data is coming back into the field. All right, so Workforce for ArcGIS. So it's really, Workforce is really thinking about two components. It's got the back office, the office component, where you have someone dispatching work out to the field workers, and then the person out in the field, the searcher, may have a mobile device, and they have their task list. So think about this as a digital version of their clipboard. Here's all the things I need to go do. Those are prioritized. They can make changes, add notes, and get that information back into the platform, so that decision makers can start understanding what information is coming back, where do we need to start refocusing our energy. And that is location aware. So obviously, it does do, if you configure it, it does do location tracking. So you can use this app to both manage where they've gone, so you can think about that from an analysis perspective, but also from a safety perspective. Where did you see them last? All right, and again, from a workflow perspective, again, we've designed these apps to work well together. So you can imagine on the mobile app, the person needs to get to a particular location. They use Navigator to do so. From that point, they can start Workforce and go to start an assignment. From there, they can immediately launch into Collector or Survey 123 and immediately jump into the data collection. Really meant to just sort of, even though they're separate apps, they're meant to work very well together. Right, a Navigator for ArcGIS. So you guys are all familiar with how the app works. You guys are all familiar with Google Maps and Apple Maps and other apps like that. But the idea really here is that you can include your own information in these packages and in these maps. So, Collector. So again, web maps. We do support high accuracy GPS, and it does work completely offline. I know many people have used that. Scott talked about that earlier this morning. Survey 123. So thinking about how do you take that paper form and turn that into a digital form with some intelligence, and capture that spatial information as well. Drone to map. So Brandon talked about UAS. So how do you get that imagery and turn it into great products? That could be a base map with high resolution imagery. That could be 3D scenes that you use for visualization or analysis. And then Explorer, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Again, take that map book, turn it into a digital form, take that anywhere with you, online or offline. Right. That is all I've got.
Excellent.
So a lot of the apps that Doug.
I'll probably we'll do the video first, slides after, because I didn't switch to embedded video.
On Wednesday specifically, we're going to do some testing with WebGIS, but try to recognize it for an audience for the staff. The field person.
No, I'll just use it.
The deployed person is probably going to be you if you're here to talk about. So.
All right, so next up, we have Justin Adams from Texas A&M, and he is going to talk about, I've got drones, now what? Emerging patterns of UAS and SAR, and he gets 14 minutes.
I won't use your 14 minutes because I know y'all want to go home. Before we start, this kind of my background real quick is I'm the UAS director for Texas A&M Center for Roboticists Search and Rescue. We're based out of College Station, Texas. That's my alternate job. I'm representing today was supposed to be my boss, David Kovar. If you know David Kovar with NASAR, he is the UAV advocate. He's not available to attend today, so I'm attending in his absence. But what I'm going to talk to you about is looking more of how UAVs can be used in response, and it can be a search and rescue component, it can be damage assessment, it can be a variety of things. And I'm going to tell you from 3 different perspectives. Harvey, Irma, and Maria. I've responded to all 3 of them. And so I'm going to kind of give you different things. The first thing you're going to see is just a quick video that we did for Fort Bend County. I was the Air Operations Branch Director for manned and unmanned in our county. And then we'll move into Florida, what we did in Irma, and then we'll move into Puerto Rico, what we did in Maria.
The Center for Robot-Assisted Search and Rescue at Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station has been working with Fort Bend County Office of Emergency Management to provide small unmanned systems, aerial vehicles, and even marine vehicles to be looking at the underneath bridges and the river. What we've been doing is providing small unmanned aerial systems primarily to give aerial imagery so that the officials can see what they're doing to make real-time decisions.
We believe this is the largest formal deployment by public officials of small unmanned aircraft systems for disaster response in our nation's history. These drone platforms working from different elevations have provided our local emergency management team with aerial photography at multiple scales and in high resolution. We have the ability to adjust unmanned aircraft flights in real time to assist with search and rescue operations or changing flood conditions. The teams were comprised of federal, state, and private organizations and agencies from across the United States, all working together to help the citizens of Fort Bend County, Texas.
So if you haven't seen, we was very fortunate that In Situ came in for free to assist us during the response. They initially went to Corpus Christi and assisted in the port assessment post-event. But if you've never seen that unit work, it's very interesting to see how it is. We require a TFR to go up for the area of operation in which they was operating. With Houston being a very high-density manned aircraft perspective, we actually were given a lower altitude. With that lower altitude, it restricted our actual downrange. We could only go 8 nautical miles from the airport we were operating out of. So there is some limitations of using large-scale UAS versus a small-scale UAS. So I talk about Harvey perspective. Fort Bend County was where I was at, southwest Houston. We have about 750,000 people in population. The challenge we have from GIS, we only have one person. One person does it for the county. There's no more. So you had a person, I reached out to Paul. We tried to engage people, and we tried to look even within the region, but the scale of Harvey was so big that it just taxed pretty much the Houston and 8 surrounding counties plus the southwest for Corpus Christi up through Rockport, and then it moved east over into the Beaumont, Port Arthur. At my house, I had 41 inches of rain. I never flooded. We were in the northwest part of the county. We have a good floodplain. The balance of Houston was not fortunate. In Fort Bend County, it's the 4th time we've flooded in the past years. It's the 3rd declared FEMA disaster in the past years. So it's nothing unique to us. The challenge was at a bigger scale because the rain set right on top of Houston, and it moved offshore and moved back onshore. So we deployed. I was deployed on August 24th. Was right there on Thursday. Moved into Friday. We was challenged on what we use UAS. They've always used them over the past 2 years in Fort Bend County. They're a very progressive emergency management organization. They use them for search and rescue. They use them for law enforcement. Then they use them for fire cause and determination. So they're very adaptive to it. We flew 119 sorties over 2 weeks. We had 13 pilots, all Part 107 pilots. So what you heard about earlier, Part 107. That's what the FAA, if you're a search and rescue organization, no matter if you're paid or unpaid, the FAA looks at that as Part 107. The only option you have, if you are a public entity, you can do what's called a public COA. That's a long process through the FAA to get that done. It's much easier to go take a test, take 60 questions, you get done with it, and you move forward. So it's a lot of people there's some misconceptions of what Part 107 is and what you can and can't do, but it's pretty straightforward. We had 2 data managers. The biggest thing in this type of event, like I said, we had almost 3 terabytes of data just in Fort Bend County, is how do you manage the data? And what we're doing right now with the National Science Foundation, we were fortunate to get 2 grants post-event that we're looking at Irma and we're looking at Harvey and looking at how we manage the data moving forward from a geospatial perspective, just from a data management perspective. The groups that responded was Florida State University, Lone Star, which is part of Texas A&M, College Station, and USAA. They all responded. We had different types of aircraft. Pretty much DJI was our, from the Mavic all the way up to you've seen In-Situ Scan Eagle, Intel Falcon 8 come in and looked at just more specific things underneath bridges for bridge assessment, Precision Hawk, Lancaster 5, and the Parrot Disco was used for search downrange perspective within line of sight, but it was the best platform for going downrange. Again, 14 different models. We also used AeroRobot 180 and 200. That's more of a DoD asset. It doesn't really fit the mission package that we had. It does have multiple sensors on it. We flip over to Irma. I departed Fort Bend County, went home for a day, seen my family, and then went straight to Irma. We pre-staged. We was part of Florida Task Force 3. We was going to support them from a search and rescue perspective. We got on Monday post-event, we went out to Putnam County, which is southwest of Jacksonville. We had 1 SAR mission that we flew, and it was a person that, come to find out, was a frequent flyer, as we would call them. And they said they were stuck in their house. We flew back there where they at. We sent the team in. They walked in waist deep water because they didn't have a boat to get in the area. Got in there, and she had no problems. So those are the only time we flew. So from a Houston perspective, we never flew any SAR missions because there wasn't any. In Irma perspective, that was the only SAR mission. So what we did then was changed our tasking. Was we went from doing search and rescue. We drove down to Collier County, to Naples. And FEMA Region 4 had wanted to do a pilot project of doing damage assessment of government structures from the PA. So we end up and moved down there and mainly just used the Mavic. You see the variety of assets that we have, but we only end up and just use the Mavic. Snapshots of the differences. Fort Bend County is densely populated, 700 plus, about 750,000 people. We had to look at the things you have outside responders that come in, don't understand the privacy laws. So Texas has its own privacy law. Florida has its own. So we had people respond into the area that didn't understand that. Became a problem. We had to send law enforcement to deal with it. We had a UAS policy in place within the county. We had dense low altitude aircraft because we had all the search and rescue that was going on in Houston proper. And what Houston did was they had 2 locations. They were dropping people off from the rescues from a litter or lifting perspective. In the middle of the response, I'm running air ops for manned and unmanned. We get a phone call. We just had Chinook land at our fairgrounds with about 60 people to 60 people there. We didn't know what to do with them because we never had any visibility. So again, most of the aircraft, manned aircraft missions were at or above 150 feet unless they were coming into hoist. But we had 12 different teams out throughout the county. So I had to look at it from a geospatial, and basically what I had was 7 different screens up, trying to look at all the manned air traffic, where my people are at, the traffic that they're getting information back, and then trying to look geospatially where it is. It became a challenge. The cellular network was intact. We had a high influx of volunteers. In Putnam County, it was rural. They have they had no policy in place. We had no air traffic to deal with at all because all the airports were closed. We had no power, and we had the cell network was down. Comparison, pretty much what we talked about before. Harvey was more rumor control. We went out and flew 119 missions. They were all video. We did do still imagery. But the problem you run into is you have thousands of images, and how do you present them on a map? And there's no easy way to do it in the current solution. I'll jump through these. This is the biggest thing you got to look at. Volunteer disaster tourism, we're used to it. But you got groups that came in. The American Red Cross decided they was going to set up all these drone teams come in our county, never talk to anybody. Became a big problem. So those are things you have to work out, and you have to work with the FAA on it. I sit on numerous boards with the FAA on how we're going to manage that. One quick thing that we're doing right now at Texas A&M is we're looking at a 4-tiered approach. Satellite, NOAA normally flies around 10,000 feet, depending on the challenges you ran into with weather. They had to go a little bit lower for Harvey, Irma, and Maria. How do we get that data? This is a Google before event. This is a 10,000-foot man that was flown by the county for their property evaluation. This is a satellite on the 30th of August that Google did an overflight. This is NOAA did at 5,000 feet. Normally it 10's what they fly at, but because of the cloud coverage we had for so long after the event, that they had to get down to a lower altitude. And this is what we did from a UAS perspective at 395 feet. So we're looking at a 4-tiered approach. How quick can you get the data? What's the best data, and where's the best approach to move forward? This is a quick snapshot we did for Irma. This was for Arizona Task Force 1. They wanted a map, and what we basically did there was we took and used Microsoft Ice. In 30 minutes from the flight, we had about 450 pictures. They was all geotagged. Geotag doesn't work in Microsoft Ice. They didn't care. They just wanted a map to show where they were actually at. So we just built them a quick map. This is what we did in Irma. Was the way we uploaded pictures was we used the Civil Air Patrol FTP site. Every flight that we did that had a geotag reference EXIF data, we uploaded that, and then FEMA looked at that from Region 4. This is kind of Puerto Rico. I'll talk real quick. That's the different areas that we covered in Puerto Rico. That was more of the high intensity areas. This is some things that the problem you had in Puerto Rico was a whole bunch of people in GIS. They didn't want to talk to each other. We had all this data. Nobody wanted it. I sent it to FEMA. I sent it to the state GIS people, and they said, we don't really care nothing about it. This is valuable information where USAR teams goes in and does the assessment of the road infrastructure. This is valuable information. Power lines we did. This road's completely gone. You just got a little bit. This is all flooding post-event. You had, from the IA perspective, we can come in and do bridge assessments. We came in and did individual assistance assessments. This is a house that slid off the side of it. It didn't happen during a storm. They had 225-mile-an-hour winds. This happened from flooding. And this happens every day now. It slid down the mountain. There's 2 cars inside that house. This is wind farm assessments that we did. This is cell tower assessments that we did. This is called Humacao, right almost where the storm came in. We did assessments. This was assessments of schools that we did. And you see on the right-hand side, that whole mountain component went through the school, and they had 3 foot of mud inside the school. But they was also using that as a shelter. So it goes back to your information for pre-planning. This is a 3D model we built for them to kind of show them the value. We haven't used Drone the Map yet. I just haven't had the chance to do it. but this is the same thing. It's using Pix4D. We can do a DSM. We can do any of that. Again, where you talked about earlier, the Explorer, this is what I used for all my assessment. This was all the electrical infrastructure, substations, and my UAS components for the facility map. So I would go in and look at it. I built the offline component, went in, picked my area where I'm going to fly. It told me from the FAA perspective what I can and can't do. This is something I built in Python. I basically take every bit of the pictures that's inside of a folder. I get the EXIF data, and I drop it in. It becomes a pin. I click on it, and you see the actual picture. I know, I'm done. That's the last one. Just one quick thing, just to show you. This is something that's also valuable. If we can get this to pop up. This is some neat things that you can do with the drone, if it will come up. So this was the area of Umakau. So we did a 360 panoramic with the drone. And then we could zoom into anywhere and see that whole area. So these are some of the things also you can do. It's not geo-reference. You'll have to manually geo-reference, but you can pull that back in. So that's my quickness.
So next, you get to contribute. This will be interesting with the room layout, so I appreciate your patience and outside of the box thinking, but we recognize we threw a lot of information at you today. We want to hear back from you on a few of the key topics, and I think Caroline's jotted down